Happy Friday the 13th, everybody, and what a better way to celebrate, well, with Friday the 13th, except we already did the first one, so now we're going to review Friday the 13th Part 2, released in 1981. Released 8 days short of a year after the first movie, Friday the 13th Part 2, as the title implies, immediately picks up on the events of the first film. That was not originally the plan, as originally Friday the 13th was going to be an anthology film series based off the Friday the 13th superstition, much like the original plans for the Halloween franchise. The difference is, Halloween actually tried it with Season of the Witch. Friday the 13th just immediately picked up where they went off after the first film made $60 million. That film also cost $500,000 to make. This one had a slightly higher budget at $1.25 million, but made a lot less money, $21.7 million. Critics at the time, of course, gave it negative reviews because gore and violence bad. Nowadays, it's looked at as a very important entry in a franchise, as it's the first film in a franchise that fully introduced Jason as the main villain. But what exactly was Jason's motivation, and how deep does bloodlust go? Well, we're going to find out right now as we take a look back at Friday the 13th Part 2, released in 1981. So our film begins outside of an apartment building, and we see the feet of a mysterious figure making his way towards it. Turns out that apartment belongs to Alice Hardy, who is having a nightmare of the last 20 minutes of the first film. And that gives us a quick recap. Pamela Voorhees was the killer, Alice chopped her head off, and then she was on a boat, and Jason jumped out of the water and snatched her, and then she woke up in the hospital and no Jason. She wakes up to a phone call from her mother, who she seems to be blowing off. She then goes to take a shower, and there's a really cool shot of the camera going towards the shower to make you think it's the killer about to strike her like in Psycho, because at the time Psycho had only come out 21 years ago. But she opens the shower instead, as she gets another phone call, but this time it's dead air on the line. She then hears something rummaging outside her window, and it's her cat, which jump scares her and dives on through. She then opens the fridge to get some cat food, but that ain't cat food, that's the head of Pamela Voorhees, and that must mean only one thing, that the killer is Jason Voorhees, and he greets her with an ice pick. Time for a big time jump. Let's go 5 years later when we meet Sandra and her boyfriend Jeff, who are looking to go to a counselor's camp just opened on Crystal Lake. They place a call to their friend Ted and run into Crazy Ralph from the first film, who's like, I'm still crazy and you guys are still in danger, and then their car gets towed and they chase it, but turns out it was Ted just setting them up. They drive on with Ted until they stumble upon a log in the middle of the road. Sandra then very smartly goes into the woods and finds a sign for the old Camp Crystal Lake, which has now been blocked off. They go to leave, and unbeknownst to them, somebody is watching them from the woods. They arrive at this counselor camp, which is run by Paul Holt. There's a lot of people there, but only a few are called out by name, including Terry, Vicky, Mark, Scott, and Paul's assistant/girlfriend, Jenny. That night, Paul tells them the spooky story of Jason Voorhees, how apparently his mother got killed after he got killed, but he's still alive and he's living in the woods, and then Ted jumps out in a scary mask and he's like, no, just kidding, that shit's all made up. The campers all settle in for the night, and then Crazy Ralph shows up, but before he can do anything, Jason kills him with barbed wire wrapped around a tree. The next day they all go for a hike, and Terry's dog Muffin explores and runs into a mysterious man. As everyone's relaxing by the lake, Sandra and Jeff, who are the smartest people on Earth, decide to go explore the old Camp Crystal Lake grounds. There they find the corpse of a dog which looks a lot like Muffin, and then they're caught by a police officer named Winslow. After Winslow takes them back to the counselor's camp and drives away, he sees someone with a bag on their head running into the woods. Now, in these part of the woods, running with a bag on your head is extremely illegal, so Officer Winslow gives chase until he finds an old shack. The shack looks abandoned, but then he finds a room which shocks him so much that he has to stare at it long enough for Jason to come up behind him and kill him. That night, Paul tells everyone that there's going to be a night on the town for everybody who wants to go, except for Sandra and Jeff, because that's their punishment. Scott, Terry, Mark, and Vicky also volunteer to stay behind as well. Terry goes for a walk and decides to skinny dip because this is a horror film in the 80s and we need to fill our gratuitous nudity quota. While she's doing this, Scott takes her clothes and she chases him until he's caught by a rope trap. She goes to get something to cut him down, but while she's doing that, Scott gets his throat slit by Jason. She comes back and sees him dead, and then sees Jason before the scene cuts away. Speaking of Jason, well, Jenny's speaking of Jason a lot to Ted and Paul at the bar, but they're like, dude, story's not real, shut up. Back at the camp, Mark and Vicky start to get close while Jeff and Sandra have sex. Vicky also wants to have sex with Mark, who is in a wheelchair, good luck with that, Vicky, and then she goes back into her cabin and puts perfume on, which is against camp rules because it attracts bears and also Jason. Apparently wheelchairs attract Jason as well, as he stabs Mark for the fucking face and then rolls him down some stairs. He then goes upstairs to Sandra and Jeff having sex, and using a spear, he gets a double kill. Vicky goes into her room, she's like, hey guys, you doing alright? And then boom, Jason sits up like the fucking Undertaker and stabs her in the leg and then in the stomach, and that's the end of Vicky. Paul and Jenny then get back to camp, don't know what happened to the 7 other people they were going out with, and they also go up to that room to find no bodies but the bed covered in blood. They go downstairs to investigate, and then Jason pops up and starts fighting with Paul. Jenny then locks herself in the bathroom where she's extremely safe. Nope, just kidding, here comes Jason for the window. She then locks herself in the kitchen where she's extremely safe. Nope, here comes Jason for the door. Oh, and hey, there's Crazy Ralph. She then locks herself in the car where she's extremely safe. Oh, nope, there comes Jason for the roof. Jason then chases her throughout the woods until she hides from him in another cabin. He finds her and almost kills her with a pitchfork, but then she pulls out a chainsaw, which Jason does not like at all, and then hits him over the head with a chair, knocking him out. Jenny eventually comes across the old shack where Jason has followed her to. She's locked herself in this nice room and turns around to see Pamela Voorhees' severed head and a bunch of bodies. Hey look, there's Alice. Finally realizing that the killer is Jason Voorhees, she decides to put on Pamela Voorhees' sweater to trick Jason into thinking that she's his mother, which is fucking brilliant, actually. And it actually works. She gets him to kneel down and everything, and she's about to slice his head off, but just at the last moment he realizes that he's been duped and blocks the blow. He then stabs her in the leg, I guess it's his trademark now, but then Paul comes out of nowhere. Where the fuck have you been? He starts fighting with Jason, again, and loses, again, and Jason's about to stab him with the pitchfork, but then Jenny gets a machete and stabs Jason in the shoulder, I think? It looks like he's dead though, so I guess it worked. They then take Jason's bag off his head and see his hideous face, only we don't get to see it. Damn shame. Jenny then gets out of that nasty ass sweater and they go back to the main cabin and they're all safe now, except maybe not because they hear something at the door. At least they're prepared this time and they're about to do battle with Muffin, the dog, who's not dead. Well, looks like everything's safe, except no bitch, because here comes Jason right for the window out here looking like, hey you guys! It's now the next morning and Jenny is being loaded into an ambulance, yelling out for Paul, who is nowhere to be seen. We then cut to Pamela Voorhees' head sitting on the altar in the shack as the movie fades out. And let's realize that this is a look back. You know what that means? It's time for our first ever Friday Big Board. I gotta be honest, this was very close and very tough ranking these two films so far. It was closer than the first 2 Scream films for me. It was closer than the first 2 Halloween films. It was razor thin close. Both these films, obviously incredibly important, probably the 2 most important films in the franchise. Like, you could have stopped here, honestly. Not saying there weren't good movies after this, there was. There's a movie after these 2 that's arguably the best in the franchise. But you could have stopped here, and you would have known everything. But was Friday the 13th Part 2 better than the first one? Well, I've looked at a lot of lists, I've tried to gauge a lot of opinions, I've seen a lot of different opinions, people ranking them different ways, but this is my opinion, and I am going to say, by a razor-thin margin, is Friday the 13th Part 2 better than Part 1? No. I'm gonna say no, personally. It's very, very close, but personally, I'm going to give Part 1 just a bit of an edge, and that is my inaugural rankings. Friday the 13th, number 1, Friday the 13th Part 2, number 2. Seriously though, ignore those critic reviews on this. If there's one thing, it's hard to take critics serious in general, but if there's one genre of film that you should not take mainstream critics' opinions serious on, it is horror movies. Trust me, dude. Mainstream critics hate horror. Even to this day. Even to this day. It may be not as bad as it was in terms of the hate, but they still hate horror movies. Do not take mainstream criticism's opinion serious on horror movies. It's not worth it. Because it's always the same thing. Oh, too much blood, too much gore, too much titties, blah blah blah. Who the fuck cares? It's a horror movie, that's the point. And it wasn't just the critics either, it's also the Motion Picture Association of America. They had to have a lot of cuts made from this movie in order to get it rated R. And I do wonder how much they cut, because honestly, I do think it was a little bit less bloody and less violent than the first film. I'm not sure if the original cut has ever been released, but if it has, I might have to look that out, because I'm willing to bet it's a lot more gory than the first film. Now you might also be wondering, did they follow this up with another Friday film less than a year later? Well, of course they didn't. That'd be ridiculous. Another film less than a year later? Come on, they need more time with that. They released another film 14 months later. Friday the 13th Part 3 was released in August of 1982, and sometime in the future, we'll be looking at that as well. But for now, that is it for my look back at one of the greatest horror films of all time. Again, razor thin margin in my opinion between these first two films. I would give the edge to the first film, but this film is, even if the first film is better, in my opinion, don't get it twisted, this film is equally as important. It introduces Jason, it brings a lot more to the storyline, it's equally as important. They could have stopped here, and it would have been fine. So if you're gonna watch the first film, definitely watch this as well. And hell, to be honest, if you watch the two films back to back, it'd only take you like 2.5 hours, so you might as well just watch them together. That is going to do it for a special Friday look back. We'll be back next Sunday with Orgasmo. Oh god, that is a different film than this. But for now, that's going to do it for my look back at Friday the 13th Part 2. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to leave it a like. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the description. Thank you to all my patrons, also named in the description, for supporting me and my channels. I appreciate you guys. With all that being said though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my look back at Friday the 13th Part 2, released in 1981. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.